On today's episode of Locked On Wild, don't be surprised if we see all of the Minnesota Wild's top 5 prospects at some point this upcoming season.
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, we are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we will take a look at the top 10 Minnesota Wild prospects in their system, according to Scott Wheeler. And we'll try to get a sense as to when we could see these players make their NHL debuts or start to become regular contributors at the NHL level, because that top 5 that we're going to talk about, it's, I would say, more likely that we see those players on the NHL roster so far this year. So where are we at with 6 through 10? We'll also talk about an interesting situation developing with David Spacek. Some interesting comments made by his dad as part of the World Junior Championships, and potential that there's another Jack McBain situation on our hands for the Minnesota Wild. So we'll talk that through as well. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild, credentialed member of the media, and we're talking prospects here today. We've gone heavy on free agency and trades here lately. Wanted to kind of move away from that aisle and just take a look at the top prospects in the Minnesota Wild system, give you an idea as to when we'll see those players, so on and so forth. So let's start. We'll start at the top, because we're going to start with the players that it is likely that we'll see here this season. And according to Scott Wheeler, the number 1 prospect in the Minnesota Wild farm system is Zeev Buium. From Wheeler, Buium put together one of the best seasons by a teenage defenseman in modern college hockey history last year, has been a big part of 2 gold medal winning World Junior teams, and is having another excellent sophomore season that has continued to solidify his status as one of the top D prospects in the NHL. We saw Buium sign his ELC, get to the NHL level, and play in the postseason against the Vegas Golden Knights to give him an idea of what he needs to do over the offseason to kind of get himself to that level. Obviously still very young, but incredibly promising as a defenseman. And honestly, I think we will definitely see him this year. There are questions as to how much, because you look at the D-core for the Minnesota Wild right now. You've got Jared Spurgeon, Jonas Brodin, Jake Middleton, Brock Faber. So you've got 4 already. Those spots are entrenched. John Merrill is a unrestricted free agent. I would be shocked if he's back. Zach Bogosian is currently under contract for 1 more season. Declan Chisholm is a restricted free agent. So it's entirely possible that the third pairing has at least 1 new player on it, if not both. And you have plenty of opportunities to fill. So if Zeev has a good camp, would not shock me at all if he makes the team outright and takes that spot on the third pairing. So the likelihood that we see Zeev Buium this year, on a scale of 1 to 5, he's at a 5. Just because now that he has games at the NHL level, seasoning is what he needs at this point, and the best place to get that is obviously the NHL level. So Zeev is a 5 out of 5 as far as will we see him this year. Number 2 on Scott Wheeler's list, Danila Yurov. Wheeler says, I've been a big fan of Yurov's game and was really high on him in his draft year. When the Wild took him number 24, he was number 12 on my list. I had concerns for a while there about how his KHL team had handled his development and the limited minutes they gave him at the KHL level, even when it looks like he was ready for more. But he forced their hand with an excellent camp and start to the season last year and put together one of the best age-adjusted seasons in KHL history by year's end. He did battle injuries at the beginning of this season and the end, worked his way back at the end of the year and signed his ELC. And with the European out clause in that ELC, the likelihood that we see Danila Yurov this year is a 5 out of 5. He has certainly had plenty of seasoning at the KHL level. He stayed at the KHL level for a couple of additional seasons in order to get more seasoning and more money there than he could make at the AHL level. So I'm going to be floored if we don't see Danila Yurov spend a good majority of the season with the Minnesota Wild. And not only can he help the Wild, but I think the Wild need him to help them with what he brings to the lineup, where he's expected to slot into the lineup. He's a 5 out of 5 as far as will we see him this year. Number 3 on Scott Wheeler's list is David Jiricek. Wheeler says Jiricek has some extremely desirable attributes marked by a booming point shot. It's explosive, and he does a really good job keeping it on target and a couple of feet off the ice. A strong 6'4" frame that continues to fill out. He's over 200 pounds, and a commanding on-ice presence that can look to take control with the puck inside the offensive zone. For Jiricek, this is where Zach Bogosian potentially comes into play, because if you're looking for size on the back end with what Spurgeon and Brodin bring you is kind of undersized, Middleton brings you the size, Bogosian is in the lineup because of his size. But we talked about it throughout the course of the season last year. The third pairing, while not a full detriment, they didn't bring a ton in the way of offensive upside. And this, to me, appears to be a situation where you could still have the size in the lineup with Jiricek while also adding some much needed offensive pop in the lineup. And Jiricek played. He got into games when the Wild had both Brodin and Spurgeon out, and he looked fine. He looked fine. He looked the part. So I would say, based off of a couple of factors, the size component and how much the Wild gave up to get him, I am going to put the likelihood that we see David Jiricek this year at a 4. And it's entirely dependent on what happens with Zach Bogosian, because he could be a replacement, a BOGO replacement, and could still give you plenty of size. It just depends on if Bogosian is still on the roster or not, which we will have to wait and see on. But I still think it's a 5. Injuries will happen, and if he is not with the team to start the year, he will be the first called up to fill in. So 4 there. Jesper Wallstedt is number 4 on Scott Wheeler's list. And as Wheeler says, this has been the first challenging year of Wallstedt's young career. Iowa has really struggled to keep the puck out of its net and defend in front of him, but it was also a porous defensive team a year ago, and he just played better than he has this season. The reality is that Wallstedt, who I talked about for years as a goalie robot, has looked human this year. His body of work and game still combine to make him a top goalie prospect, but there are some areas that need work. Will we see Jesper this year? Well, this is a 5 out of 5 because he is, at this point, Marc-Andre Fleury is retired, not coming back. Filip Gustavsson is penciled in as the starter, but there is need for a backup behind. And Jesper signed a contract, a 2-year extension that is a one-way contract. So he will be at the NHL level. Now, we've talked quite a bit about what happened this year. The Iowa team in front of Jesper was not great. Jesper had some struggles himself. I think there was a lot of the mental component that came into play this year. Large part due to the Minnesota Wild telling him to get an apartment. I would personally have waited to do that myself, but I think getting to the offseason and getting a chance to just refresh, put in some work this offseason, really get after it, I think is going to do him a world of good. And it's not going to shock me whatsoever if he comes back next season with a purpose to try to show that this past season was a full aberration and not who he is. And I'm fully expecting that he'll bounce back and rebound and be just fine. So he's a 5 out of 5. And the final one we'll talk about before we break, Liam Ohgren is number 5 on Scott Wheeler's list. Wheeler says there has always been a lot to like about Ohgren as a player. He's strong on pucks, holding them with ease against his peers, and comfort against pros, which has helped him become a natural at drawing penalties and has helped him hold his own in a depth role to start in the NHL. He's also a combination shot and pass, power and finesse player who can show a variety of tools over the course of a game. Now, looking at the Minnesota Wild rosters we've talked about, Marcus Johansson and Gustav Nyquist and Justin Brazeau gone. So you have those spots, which were all rostered players. Vinny Hinostroza is returning. So you have 2 spots right there, depending on what happens with Marco Rossi. You have 2 spots that are available to be filled from within. And again, with injuries, I am putting it at a 5 out of 5 that we see Liam Ohgren this season. He played in spurts and then went down to Iowa and was one of the leading goal scorers for that Iowa Wild team last year. Similar to what we saw with Marco Rossi a couple of seasons ago. At some point, I don't know that there's a ton more that Ohgren can learn at the AHL level that he can't at the NHL level. I think with him, the confidence is just the thing that needs a little bit of a boost. If he can get some confidence at the NHL level, then he's going to be just fine. He already looks the part. He's got the size. He's got he's got just the intriguing builds and the power forward ability. It's just a matter of him trusting his tools and not being afraid to let it rip. So I'll say a 5 out of 5 for him. And like I said at the open, not a shock that the top 5 prospects all have very good odds to be seen this year in more than just injury call-ups. Like, I think the only one that is looked at as maybe an injury call-up is Jiricek, but if he has a great camp, he's going to make the team. And then you've got all 5 playing critical roles potentially on this roster. Now, it's after that where some of the questions come in. And so we'll talk about 6 through 10 and when we could expect to see them make an impact as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a wonderful source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios are one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you 10% of your daily value. Plus, they are packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. I call them a guilt-free snack because you can have a handful or 2 or even an entire bowl. I've done it. You can have an entire bowl of Wonderful Pistachios and not have to feel guilty about eating them. I have a bag on me at all times. We're going the honey roasted no shells. Those that are everydayers of the show know that that's been my go-to for quite some time. So if you're looking for the perfect guilt-free snack, get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Again, make sure to hit that subscribe button on YouTube. And if you are so inclined, leave us a 5-star review on your favorite audio platform. We certainly appreciate the feedback. Listener survey should be done by the end of this week. And then we will get you an opportunity to fill that out and to give your feedback on the show where we're hoping to head to. So be on the lookout. More details on that coming soon. Continuing to discuss the top 10 prospects for the Minnesota Wild. Let's go to number 6 on the list. According to Scott Wheeler of The Athletic, Riley Heidt hits number 6. And as Wheeler states, number 23 on my board when the Wild took him, number 64. Heidt looked more like a late first than a late second last season in the WHL. After registering 97 points in a full 68-game schedule on a middle-of-the-pack Cougars team in his draft year, Heidt finished third in the WHL in points with 117 and second in assists last year. His production hasn't quite been as prolific this year, but he's still on pace for another 100-point season. Now, Heidt did sign his entry-level contract, and because of the fact that he did not get into any NHL games, that contract is going to slide. So his contract, his ELC, will officially start in 2025, 2026. Now, he played another season in the WHL because of his age. He was just 19 at the time. And so the only options for him last year were the NHL or the WHL. I still believe he's going to get at least one season in Iowa before we see him really make his mark on the NHL level. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if that's one of those, let's just let him cook at the AHL level, not put him in position unless he earns it to get a call up to the NHL level. Just let him get acclimated and see how he fits into that AHL game. If he impresses, then you go from there. But I think 2026, 2027, or 2027, 2028, I would lean more towards 2027, 2028 as like a full-time role. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if we see him start to get some games in 2026, 2027. Again, this is all dependent on his process. If he fast tracks, then you've got a good option. If the Wild suffer some injuries next year, which we know will happen, if he fast tracks his development, then you could see him much quicker than that. It's all dependent on kind of what he does. Number 7 on Wheeler's list is Charlie Stramel. As Wheeler notes, his transfer to MSU to play under Adam Nightingale, who was his coach at the program, has done wonders. Though he is second on the Spartans in scoring and has gotten back to what makes him effective and even impactful as a junior. Stramel is already expected to head back to Michigan State for his senior season and get some work in. You know, just continue to build off of what was a really strong junior season for him. So he's 20 years old right now, and the Wild have until August 15th of 2026 to sign him to his ELC. So they still have plenty of time. And much like you saw with Zeev Buium, if he has a great year next year, it could end up that the Wild do what they have done with many other players and sign him to his ELC and get him on the roster just to get him some playing time. Although, to be fair, that is a little easier to accomplish with defensemen than it is with forwards. But regardless, Stramel's going to sign his ELC after his senior season, and then he will get put into the pipeline. So his ELC will start 2026, 2027 at the latest. And so I'll, again, circle 2027, 2028 as kind of when we start to see him get some time at the NHL level. So 2027, 2028, the Wild should have some good reinforcements that are starting to hit the roster, which will be right at the time that some of these contracts are starting to come off the books. Ryan Hartman will be an unrestricted free agent that season. Marcus Foligno will have 1 year left. Yakov Trenyan, if he's still here, will have 1 year left. Freddie Gaudreau will have 1 year left. Those players will all be coming off the books at that point or a year later. So there will be plenty of reserves to be able to take over at that point. Number 8 on Scott Wheeler's list is Ryder Ritchie. Wheeler says Ritchie's combination of skill and skating has always been appealing. Ritchie is a shifty playmaking winger who can make highlight reel skill plays with the puck. He can play at multiple paces and adjust his tempo between them. Now, Ritchie is going to be heading to college here to play. So I think he is going to be in a similar vein as far as what we can expect for a time frame. Because Ritchie is he's 18 right now. So I would not be surprised if the Wild maybe sign him. They've got until June 1st of 2026. He's going to get at least a year in college. He's going to Boston to play there. So he'll get a year in, and they'll see how he's looking, and we'll make a determination from there. So I would say with Ritchie, just because he is, I think he's a year behind the rest of these names, we'll pencil him in for 2028, 2029 as to when we see him on the roster. Number 9 on the list is Aaron Kiviharu. Wheeler says context is particularly important when trying to slot and understand Kiviharu because he's been around a long time and has been a top 2006 internationally, but is also a 5'10" fourth-round pick. This year, he finally played at the World Juniors and captained Finland to a surprise silver medal. More importantly, he has also stayed healthy and has played to decent results as a teenage defenseman in Liga, playing just under 17 minutes per game. So for Kiviharu, the health was the biggest thing for him. He had injuries coming into the draft, and the fact that now he has been able to at least distance himself from them a little bit is a good step in the right direction. Here's the thing for Kiviharu. The Wild have until June 1st, 2028 to sign him. They control his rights until 2028. So there's plenty of time. And, with the defense the way it is, there isn't a huge rush on D to get players up. So Kiviharu could certainly be a project to kind of fill in on the backside of that defense. You got Faber locked in. You'll have Buium locked in long term. By that point, you'll hopefully have David Jiricek in the lineup. You've got plenty of names that will be locking down those spots. And that then leaves you much less that you need to worry about filling. On the contract front, Spurgeon is signed through 2026, 2027. Brodin is signed through 2027, 2028, as is Jake Middleton. So you've got a good portion of the D-core locked in long term. So for Kiviharu, I'll say that we see him. I'll say 2029. It's crazy that we're already getting to this point with years, because they'll sign Kiviharu to his ELC, I would imagine at some point within the next couple of years, and then they'll have 3 more years after that. So I'll say 2029, but I think his is the biggest wild card. Like, his is the furthest off, but I think if he just continues to just push and pace, we could see him certainly before that. He's the biggest wild card, though, of the bunch for sure. And that gets us to number 10. But I want to talk about number 10 a little more in depth because there have been some interesting quotes regarding David Spacek that we need to dive into. And we will do that as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wilds after this. Final segment of today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Again, make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Let's talk about David Spacek a little bit here. Before we get to Scott Wheeler's thoughts, a tweet from MNW Young Guns says the following. This was last week on the 13th. Former defenseman Jaroslav Spacek, the father of David Spacek, said to Czech media today, David is playing in the World Championship partly to get out of Minnesota. He doesn't have a chance there. Take that in for a second. Here's what Scott Wheeler had to say about David Spacek. He played well for Czechia at last year's Men's World Championships, and now in his second pro season, he's playing 20 minutes per game and is Iowa's most productive defenseman and power play quarterback. Though he has been productive across levels and can move pucks, he's also an all-around D you can count on. He's physical and stout. But let's look at the reality of the situation here. The D-core already was crowded with what you have at the NHL level. Spurgeon, Brodin, Middleton, Bogosian, Buium, and Faber. So you have at most one spot right now with Zeev in the lineup to fill. That's assuming Declan Chisholm isn't brought back, and that's assuming that Zach Bogosian stays. If there is a spot that is open, that's going to Jiricek. And for Spacek, he is going to be in the final year of his entry-level contract, and then he'll be a restricted free agent at that point. And, you know, you can sound alarm bells on this as to, oh, here's another prospect that got away from the system. Reality of the situation is that Spacek was always going to be third behind Buium and Jiricek regardless. So if he waits to try to see if a spot will open up for him, you know, that's fine, but a lot of players just don't want to. Jack McBain didn't want to sign here because he didn't see a path to the NHL as being a center, and the fact that when he was in the system, the Wild had their full lineup locked in. So he didn't see a spot for him to be able to, you know, hop in and grab a spot. The reality of drafting is that you draft players that you think will be fits for your system. A percentage of those picks don't pan out, and a percentage of those picks, especially now, as we have kind of moved into this, I'm not going to turn this into a college athletics rant. As we've moved further and further into like a, you know, transfer portal purgatory in college athletics, I think players just feel more and more like, well, if I'm not going to play at the NHL level here, get me out of here. And so you can add those players into the number that don't pan out. I would be more concerned if this was somebody like Zeev or was somebody like Danila Yurov who said, I don't feel like I have a path here, so I don't want to wait around. I want to go somewhere else. David Spacek, while a good prospect, I'm not going to try to undersell that. Spacek is a good prospect, but the Wild have a pretty crowded D-core as it is. So if this is going to happen, then what I think you do is if you're going to make a trade this offseason, you include him in it. Give him a change of scenery that he's looking for. There have been much more high-profile examples than this. Remember what happened to Rutger McGroarty with the Winnipeg Jets. McGroarty didn't feel like he had a path forward with the Jets, so he said that he was not going to sign, and the Jets ended up trading him to Pittsburgh, where now on an older team, he has a path to get to the NHL level in quick fashion and kind of start his career out. Spacek has to beat out the 6 guys that are penciled into the lineup right now, Jiricek, and probably Carson Lambos to get to the NHL level. And we saw Cameron Crotty get time last year. He would have to beat out a lot of different pieces to get to the NHL level and get regular playing time. And if the response is, well, find time for him, I would rather that time go to Zeev Buium and David Jiricek, because I think those are the guys that you expect will be regulars in the lineup at this point. So I would rather they get the time to make sure that they are that and just get them comfortable playing at the NHL level. So it's always a little bit of a shock to hear, but that's just the reality of how the situation goes. And I think there are many different forms to this. We saw what happened with Adam Beckman, where it just felt like he never got an opportunity to come up. Sammy Walker, another one. Players just get into organizations where they feel like it's not a good fit for them, and they elect to move on and go somewhere else. As much as teams say, we don't feel like this player's a fit in our organization, players do the same thing. Players say, I don't feel like I'm a good fit here. So don't be surprised at all if we see Spacek included in a trade. While the Wild still do retain his rights, you can throw him in as a sweetener if you make any sort of a big trade this offseason to try to improve the NHL roster. They have plenty in the way of D prospects, and let's consider this as well. Guys like Jack Pert, Kyle Masters, Carson Lambos, Ryan O'Rourke, those guys see what's going on with David Jiricek and Zeev Buium too, that they've been putting in time in the AHL level for the last couple of seasons, and all of a sudden these guys leapfrog them. So they see that, and that's going to be in the back of their head too, is like, hey, I better pick my performance up a little bit so that I can get a little higher up that pecking order to get to the NHL level at some point. We know my stance on the coaching staff down there. I'm going to have to do some further digging as to what's going on down in Iowa, but it's just an interesting situation with Spacek, and I think the response from Bill Guerin will be to give him what he's looking for and include him in a trade to whoever they end up trading with this offseason. Now, beyond that, some of the other names that made the list, Mikey Milne was number 12 on Wheeler's list. Carson Lambos was number 13. Hunter Haight was 14 on Scott Wheeler's list. And Aaron Pionk was number 15 on Scott Wheeler's list. It was actually his top 15, but top 10 sounds way better. And then we just go with the honorable mentions. So we'll keep an eye on the prospects, of course, because it's Locked On Wild. We keep tabs on everything. And that's our episode here for today. So appreciate everybody tuning in as you do each and every day of the week. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We've got them for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.